Hi, I'm Dan Cortopassi. Today I'm reviewing a set of 3 HO scale Tier IV GEVo locomotives from ScaleTrains. All of these locomotives are part of the ScaleTrains rivet counter line. I'll be treating these models as a set for the purposes of this review, though they were not sold that way. UP2678 is one of a number of models lent to me by fellow modeler Mark Wiens so that I could review them. UP2571 and the BNSF unit are my own. I'll be using the BNSF unit for the rip track segment. The Union Pacific units are decorated in the flag scheme with the Building America slogan. Each unit represents an ET44AC, what UP calls a C45AH. The BNSF unit is painted in the Heritage 3 scheme with the swoosh logo. It represents an ET44C4. ScaleTrains offers these models in 2 versions. The current factory direct price for a DCC-ready rivet counter unit is $174.99. The factory direct price for a model with DCC and sound is $269.99. I purchased my sound-equipped units in September 2017 for $224.99 each, direct from ScaleTrains. Mark purchased his sound-equipped locomotive in July 2020 for $249.99 from Lombard Hobbies. Since there are 3 engines in this review, we'll start the models at 300 possible points. The model comes in a sturdy cardboard box. Inside, there's an operator's manual with information about the DCC decoder. A 2-piece plastic cradle protects the model. The models have plastic protectors attached to each truck. These pull off easily. The plastic handrails have foam inserts to keep them from getting bent out of shape. This is a good box that should protect the model for storage and transport. Tier IV is a U.S. Environmental Protection Agency standard for emissions levels that new locomotives were required to meet by January 1, 2015. According to the dieselshop.us, UP2571 was delivered in September 2015. Union Pacific 2678 and BNSF 3804 both entered service on their respective railroads in 2016. These units have 4,400 horsepower and computer-controlled AC traction. They are an evolution of GE's 4,400 horsepower wide cab design that goes back to the C44-9Ws and the AC4400s of the 1990s. The BNSF unit is an ET44C4 with only 4 powered axles. The center axle on each truck is an idler. From what I've read, with AC traction and computer control, these units have nearly the same tractive effort as a 6-motor unit. I compared the models to photos of the real thing and they look correct with respect to detail and paint. Mark's UP unit and the BNSF unit have the slope box around the exhaust stack. My model of UP2571 has the earlier, more squared-off box. These are variations that appear on the real thing. The antenna arrays on the roof also differ between the BNSF and the UP units. ScaleTrains definitely did their homework on these models. The paint on the engines is opaque. Unfortunately, it's just thick enough to the point where it starts to soften some of the details on the model. The BNSF orange also looks slightly dull to my eye compared to prototype photos. The UP yellow on Mark's unit also looks a little dull, like a unit that's faded. It might be hard to see on video, but my UP unit from an earlier run has a more saturated yellow color, though it's still dull to my eye. The gray on my unit is lighter than on Mark's. Mark's unit also has a very light gray on the anti-glare panel in front of the windshield and on the walkways. My unit uses the same color for both the walkways and the top of the hood. Looking at photos, it appears that both walkway colors may be correct. I'm assuming that the paint used on the walkways on the prototype units was changed at some point. Most of the markings are crisp and all but the tiniest writing is legible with magnification. Even some of the brake cylinders have labels on them. There are some small voids in the markings at panel seams, but some real locomotives look like this too. Some of the striping on the BNSF unit is a little ragged over the louvers under the engineer's side cab windows. This is out of step with the overall quality of finish on the rest of the model, so I'm taking 5 points. Many of the grills on the sides of the units are photo etched with detail behind. You can see through the locomotive completely in the area just below the radiator section, and there's fan detail inside. The grills that aren't photo etched have a paint treatment that gives them the illusion of depth. The handrails are made of a flexible plastic that should stand up to normal handling. On my 2 units, some of the stanchions are slightly crooked, a common problem with diesels that have plastic handrails. On Mark's unit, they're straighter, so maybe ScaleTrains did something to improve them in the newer production runs. Speaking of handrails, on both my unit and Mark's, the same 2 stanchions had popped out of the holes on the front of the unit. I was able to coax them back into place with tweezers. In front, the models have freestanding wire grab irons and separately applied windshield wipers. The pilots have uncoupling levers, MU cables, and air hoses. The plows appear to be correct. In back, there are more freestanding grabs and even some more photo-etched grills. The rear pilots have the same details as the front, minus the plow. There are also spare knuckle holders. As we've already seen, the models have very detailed antenna arrays on top of the cab. There are a few freestanding grab irons on the roof. The models have nicely done horn castings. There are warning labels and hinge details, and unit-specific exhaust stacks. The radiators have more photo-etched grills on top. Even though it's hard to see, the models have a lot of freestanding plumbing detail under the sills. All of the wheels pick up current and all the axles are powered. That's not quite prototypical for the BNSF unit, but I doubt many modelers are going to want to try to find a way to unpower the center axle on each truck. All of the engines came with ScaleTrains couplers on both ends. On Mark's UP unit, the front coupler is at the correct height. The rear coupler is also correct. The front coupler on the BNSF unit is correct. It looks like I already swapped the rear coupler on the BNSF unit for a Caddy. My notes indicate that the original coupler was at the correct height, so I'll give this one the benefit of the doubt. On my UP unit, the front coupler is slightly low, so I'm taking 5 points. The rear coupler is correct. All the wheels on the UP units are in gauge according to the NMRA standards gauge. Unfortunately, 2 of the wheel sets on the rear truck of the BNSF unit are narrow in gauge, so I'm taking 5 points. None of the units have any noticeable body wobble. Mark's UP unit weighs 23.2 ounces. The BNSF engine weighs 26.1 ounces. My UP unit weighs 26 ounces even. It seems odd that there's a nearly 3-ounce difference between the 2017 production units and Mark's 2020 model. The only thing I can figure is that ScaleTrains made some kind of change to the mechanism between production runs. On my 2 engines, drawbar pull peaked at a hefty 4.9 ounces on my force gauge. Mark's engine pulled 3.8 ounces, probably because it's lighter. A lot of HO scale diesels pull in the 2.5 ounce range, so all 3 of these are strong engines. Each model has a Loc-Sound DCC and sound decoder. My notes indicated that there was a discrepancy between the supplied instructions and the way the function keys were assigned on my BNSF model, but it isn't that way now. It's possible that I reprogrammed the engine at some point. Since Mark's model is unaltered, I'll test the lights and running characteristics with that one. F8 turns on the sound, number boards, ground lights, and walkway lights. My units don't have operating walkway lights or ground lights, so this is something new that ScaleTrains has done to more recent production models. That might explain the difference in weight, since they probably had to make room for more LEDs and electronics. F0 turns on the headlights, which are directional. The front headlight is on when the model is set to move forward, and the rear headlight is on when the model is set to move backwards. F6 turns on the ditch lights. F12 dims the headlight. F5 puts the unit in DPU mode, which lights the headlight dim in the opposite direction of travel and turns off the ditch lights. F2 sounds the horn and the auto bell. F1 rings the bell by itself. F4 turns on the dynamic brake sounds. F10 is a brake. Pressing it will make the engine come to a stop. How quickly it does so depends on the momentum programmed into the decoder. Pressing it again releases the brake and the locomotive will accelerate back up to speed. F9 turns on drive hold, which allows you to adjust the motor sounds with the throttle without changing the locomotive's speed. This can be used to simulate a heavy train starting in notch 8, or it can be used to simulate coasting. The model runs very smoothly. My BNSF engine has the out-of-gauge wheels, so I want to fix that. I also want to swap out the front coupler for a Caddy. I'll tackle the wheels first. To remove the shell, first remove the screws that hold the draft gear boxes in place. The shell will then lift off the frame. To fix the gauge problem, I'll need to remove the offending wheel sets from the locomotive. In order to do that, I'll first need to remove the screws that hold the upper half of the frame to the lower half. Be careful not to separate the two pieces too far, as there are wires going down to the trucks that don't have a lot of slack in them. The short wires really complicate the entire procedure. The truck towers are put together similar to the ones in many other model diesels, but access is difficult. I'm not taking any points for this, but I would like it if these units were just a little easier to work on. It took a few tries, but I was able to pry the clip that holds the worm gear to the top of the truck tower using a small screwdriver. Once the truck was loose, it took a few more tries to disengage the 6 clips that hold the bottom cover plate in place. Because the wires are so short, and because they're soldered to the wipers on the cover plate, I had to turn the cover plate sideways instead of removing it completely. Be careful not to damage the electrical wipers. Once the wheel set is removed, twisting and pulling will expand the gauge. I only move it until the flanges fit into the slots in the NMRA standards gauge. While I have the truck apart, I might as well paint the wheel faces. I'm using some railroad tie brown. Since these things are a little hard to work on, I wouldn't recommend painting the wheel faces this way unless you need to take the truck apart for some other reason like I did. Reassembly is the reverse of disassembly. KD158 whisker couplers fit into the factory draft gear boxes. The coupler ended up just slightly low, so I had to file some material from the coupler mounting pad. Thankfully, it didn't take much. Now the front coupler is at the correct height. I checked the rear again too, since I had to remove it to take the model apart. A more practical way to paint the wheel faces is to clip test leads to the bottom cover plate on one truck where the copper wipers are. With the engine on its side, I'll get the wheels moving at a slow speed. Then I can put the brush against the wheel faces and let the spinning do the work for me. After the paint dries and with the wheels spinning, I'll use a wire brush and my motor tool to clean the wheel treads. It seems like no matter how careful I am, some paint always ends up on them. I keep the motor tool rotating from the back of the wheel to the front so that I don't scour any paint from the wheel faces. I can use the same technique to apply some dark brown weathering powder with a micro brush. Now the wheels are weathered, and that's one less thing I'll have to do later. Let's see what we've got. The BNSF engine had a paint flaw on the louvers on the engineer's side, so I took 5 points in the paint and detail category. One of the engines had a low coupler and one had out-of-gauge wheels, so I took a total of 10 points in the standards and operation category. That leaves us with 285 out of 300 possible points, which averages to 95 points, a solid A on a report card. Individually, BNSF 3804 scored 90, UP 2571 scored 95, and Mark's model UP 2678 gets a perfect 100. These models definitely get green signals. I think ScaleTrains did an outstanding job on these models. If you're looking for some modern era HO scale motive power for your layout, then I think you might like them. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.